Hello and welcome to a Django Inline Formset example. So before we start, I'm going to tell you it's going to be a class-based view example. In this example, we're going to be utilizing just two tables with one foreign key. Now, this is just one of two tutorials I'm going to build for Inline Formset. So here we're going to start with the more simplistic two tables with one foreign key, and then we'll move on to the three tables with one foreign key in the next tutorial. In this example, then, we're going to build a very small scaled application in Django, whereby we're going to utilize our two tables with one foreign key to build a form that's going to allow us to add, edit, update, and delete, all from one form. So just finally, to point out and to give you more information about what's expected here, in this example, like I said, we're going to be utilizing class-based views. So TemplateView, ListView, CreateView, DetailView, and FormView. And also I'll bring in the SingleObjectMixin. And then we'll go ahead and think about some overrides for the FormView. So we'll build our own functions for get, post, and the get form. So let me just take you through a preview of what it is that we're going to build. So there aren't any wonderful graphics here. This is just a simple setup which you can expand. So we've got two options to begin with: all authors and add an author. So let's just go ahead and add an author. Let's just call this name one. So we can add authors. That might be adding a new recipe. That might be adding a new book in a bigger store. That might be adding a new invoice or a new receipt or something. Anything that has a foreign key parent-child relationship set up, we can use that here. So let's add a new author. So now we have a new author. And we have a message, author has been added. So I'll show you how to do that. And we have the author name here. So now what we can do is edit the author books. So this is where we're going to need our inline in order to add all this functionality here, because this is all going to be added automatically. What I can do here is add books, and you can expand upon these this field set easily. So I'm able to add books, update the collection. Now I can see all the books that are associated to this author here, name one. So now I've got that, I can then go in and just edit them. I can delete that one. I can update this one to book 22, and then potentially I can add a new one. So I can perform multiple operations at the same time and then just go ahead and update the collection. And there we go. So all the time we're associating our data to this particular author. This is all the books. This could be, like I said, anything that you might have. And this is all using class-based views. And that's going to take a lot of the back end work out for you to kind of add all this functionality that you would have to do manually normally, utilizing functions or function-based views. So in addition to that, that's really what we're building up to. We can have a look at the whole collection, all the authors, and then drill down to each author and see what books are associated to them. And again, like I said, that might be recipes, that might be invoices, that might be trying to create a purchase, and so on. In this tutorial, we're going to be utilizing two tables. Now here I'm using author and book table. You could replace this with category and book, maybe collection and book. It could be invoice and invoice items, for example. So this could be a whole host of different connections you might have between or situations you might have with two tables with a foreign key. So here in this example, we're going to have two tables, an author table and a book table, which is going to have a foreign key to the author table. So essentially here we're building a one-to-many. So one author may have many books. And our aim really is to display a form that will show the author information and all the books associated to that author. So a classic situation, we may have a form that allows us to update, add, edit data in the author table, and then we might build another form that allows us to do the same thing again with the book table. So an alternative way of working is utilizing an inline form set. So as Django documentation suggests, these simplify the case of working with related objects via a foreign key. So because the author table and the book table have a foreign key between the tables, it means potentially we can work with the data in the author table and the book table at the same time. And this is all simplified for us utilizing the inline form set feature. So now we can potentially build a form that can grab data from both the author and book table, and that will allow us to perform actions within one form. For example, view the data within the form, edit the data in the form, delete, and also then add new data from that single form. So just focusing there on this form and the ability for this form to view, edit, delete, and add data to these tables from the one form. This is going to be further simplified by, in this example, using class-based forms. So before we start, this is what we're going to build up towards. We're going to try and build a form that's going to allow us to access all the books about a particular author. And within this form, it's going to show us all of the books that are associated to that author. We're going to be able to edit those books in place. And then also, and that will mean we can either edit the text or delete them. So we can choose that. Or at the bottom of the form, we can then add some more data to, or add a new book in this case, to the author. So that we're going to be able to do that, those multiple tasks all at once in that one form. So when we press submit, that's going to update, delete, edit that data and save it in the corresponding tables. So I've gone ahead and created a new folder for my project, and I'm here in Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead now and just create a new virtual machine. And then of course we just need to activate that machine. So you can skip ahead all this if you like. Maybe I'll save the project halfway through before we get into the kind of juicy bits of the code. And then if you're familiar with setting up a project, you can just skip to that section. So let's now go ahead and just move into there. So I will do this step by step, and I have some feedback from the community that some would prefer me to type everything out. So I'll try and mix it up a little bit here and type some things out rather than just copy and paste them in, as I prefer to do, because I can easily then explain them. I find it very hard to type and talk at the same time. Okay, so we can activate the project. So let's Django, we're going to pip install Django. So once we've done that, we'll go ahead and create a new project. So let's go ahead and Django admin, let's start project, sorry. So we're going to just call this as per normal core space dot, so don't forget the dot there. And then we're now going to create a new project then. So let's start, sorry, app. We'll just call this, we'll call this books. So now we've made that, of course, we're just going to go into the core and settings and add this to our app. Books. There we go. So we've added the project. So we're now going to go ahead and create our simple tables for this example. So inside of our models here, we're going to need two tables. So I'll make the assumption that you know how to make a simple model. So let's just go ahead and see this. So we're going to bring in models so we can build some models. We're going to need to create a reverse later. So we'll bring that in for now. That's going to be for a later point where we build a get absolute URL point so that we can reverse the URL. And then we're going to create a class here called author. So we're going to have two classes. That's just going to have a name. So I'm going to set this up here with the null false blank false max length of 255. So we're going to have a name here. So blank false and null false. So we're forcing the data to be entered here in this field. So that's pretty much all we need. You can add some more if you like. We're just going to set this up in a nice simple way. So we're just going to return the name of the author by default, done the string method. And then we're going to need a new table here for book. So again, I'm just going to add a title, null false, blank false. So I'm just fixing it again so that we have to enter something here in the title. And then we're going to need to build then our foreign key. So author models dot foreign key, and then the name of the table that we're building a connection to. So remember, this is going to be a many to one or one to many. So one author will have many books, and there'll be many books associated with one author. So null false again, blank false again. So there has to be something here in this author. There has to be anyway, because we're building a foreign key. So we can't build a book unless there is actually a foreign key. So there has to be an author set in our database, in our author table. And that's an important thing to understand here if you're not familiar with databases, what a foreign key is. Otherwise, this is a little bit lost on you potentially of what is happening here. So a foreign key, we're building a link between this table and the author table via the foreign key. So when we make a new author, that's going to have a name. But remember, Django also adds the ID. So this ID is going to be a unique primary key, a unique field that's going to associate the author's name in this database. So what we can then do is use that ID to uniquely identify that piece of data or that author in the database, so that we can then add books, individual books, to that particular author. So what we end up with is the title of the book and then the ID of the author that's set here in the author table. Therefore, building a link between this book here and the author. And that's what we're going to use. That connection is what we're going to use in the inline form to gather and generate data and enable us to select data about specific authors, what books the author has in the database. So now we've got our model in place. Let's go ahead now and let's migrate. I think we're ready now to migrate. So make migrations. So that's going to prepare the data, of course, and then we migrate. There we go. Okay, so we should be able to start our server now. So it should work. Looks like it's okay. So let's now go ahead and actually build this up. So we're going to need a home page of sorts. So let's go ahead and build the first page. So we'll start with the URLs. So let's just create a new file here called urls.py. And then we just need to go into our core URLs, of course, and just remove all this stuff here. And then we're going to need to bring in the include. And then that's going to allow us then to extend the paths that are available here. So we've now got path. And then we want to create a home page. So it's just going to be blank and then the comma. And then we need the include, right? So what we're going to do here now is include the URLs that we're going to set up in our, let me just close this, in our books application. So let's go ahead and do that. So we just first of all need to just define the app books and then .url. So go into the books app and then find the URLs. And then we're going to give that a namespace of books. So that's going to allow us to easily access the URLs in this namespace, so to speak, equals books. Okay, so there we go. That makes the link then. And again, remember, we're just using the default root directory of our server, passing that across here in the URLs. So in our books URLs, we can now kind of start to build this up. So we're going to need well, we can just copy everything across, but let's just try this out from Django.urls. We're going to import just path, so we just need that. And then we're going to need our URL pattern. That's going to equal a new path. So we want to pass to our home page. So let's just build that. So again, it's just going to be this root directory. And then we now want to connect this up to our view. So the first view that we're going to build is going to be called home. Let's just call it home view. Now remember, we're using class-based views here. So we're going to need to name this with capitals. And then it's going to be as view. And then we can give this a name. Name equals, we'll just call this home. Okay, so for mine, the default are doubles here. So if you're wondering, I swear my keyboard keeps changing. Okay. Oh, okay, so this is our books. Right, so we're also going to need here an app name equals It's going to be called books. I think it was books. Have a look here. So books is a namespace, and then books is now the app name. So we can get rid of the core now. So we're done with that. We can double check if there's any problems, of course, by going in here. So we've not defined the view, of course. That's okay. So let's get rid of that core URL. So this is our URLs here then in the books. So now we're ready to go over to the views, and let's just build up a view here for our first. Of course, we're going to need to import the views. So we might as well do that, haven't we? So from .import views. So now we can go into our views here, and we can now start to build our view. So the first view we're going to build is obviously the home view. Now I'm not going to mess about here. I'm just going to paste this in. So we're going to build a class-based view here. It's going to be called home view. We're going to be utilizing the template view from the generic views. So we're going to import that in. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you have seen the rest of the class-based view series, you've seen that we've already started utilizing, and I've given you an overview of these class-based views, the default generic views. So in short then, these views here, we're bringing in an existing view with all the functionality that this view provides. So the template view then, if you have a look at the documentation here, it's just renders a given template with a context containing parameters captured in the URL. So this is a simple view that's going to automatically render a given template with any context, with any data that we send across. So here you can see all we're doing is we're setting up in this class-based view the template name, which is going to be home. So now then in our books, let's just set up our templates. So we need we're going to use the in-app templates, so templates folder. And then inside of here, we're going to then add our template. So new file, home.html, and then let's just call that home. And then we're going to need a base as well. So let's just create a new file here and call this base.html. So we're just going to extend from that base in our system. So the base is going to be a fairly simple setup. I'll sort that out in a second, but let's just go back to our view here. So that's all that we need to do in this view. There's nothing else here. This is going to show the home page, just to confirm that. So we've set out our URL for the home page. We've created our view, which is just going to be showing our template. And now we can go into to sort out our templates. So if this isn't familiar, I'm going to whiz through this. So first of all, we're going to need a doc type because we're using HTML5. This is on our base template we're going to be building and extending from. So we're going to need our HTML tags. I've set the language as EN US. We can change that to whatever you like, of course. It's not a mandatory field. So that's going to be taken from your browser anyway, from your operating system, the default language. So we've got head here. So this is the next set of tags we need. Head, inside of our head, I've got the character set UTF-8, which is the default in the browser. Probably don't need to define that. And then we've got the metadata here. We're using Bootstrap. So name, viewport, content width, etc. So these are just Bootstrap settings or browser settings that allows us to scale the page at certain resolutions, etc. Just controls the scale of the page. And then we're going to bring in the Bootstrap CSS. So this is the Bootstrap CSS. Just go over to the Bootstrap webpage, go to docs and have a look at the CDM for it. Here I'm using 5.0 and then we'll add the title. So I'm adding a block here for the title because this is going to be overridden on other pages. So a block allows me to kind of override this, being that I'm going to import this or utilize this base class within all the templates. So I've got my block title for that. The default is going to be called homepage, and anything else I override will be overridden. Anything that I include on other pages will override the text here. So that's my title. Then I've got my body tags, and then I'm going to put everything within the main tags, and then go ahead and create my container fluid from Bootstrap, so a full width container. And then I'm going to create this flex container here, where we're going to align the items in the center and then give it a padding at the top and bottom of 5. So that's just a Bootstrap class for padding at the top and the bottom, py, the y-axis. So we've got that. So we're going to line this these boxes in the middle here. And you can see what we're going to do now is we're going to, at a small scale, we're going to show the column or this element in the full width. And then as we go further up in resolution, we're going to scale down the elements inside of this element here. And then you can see I'm using MX Auto. So that should help center everything. So we've then got the content block. So you can see that every page is going to be wrapped up with this. So instead of me putting this on every single page, I only need to write this once. And this is the block content. So that's going to be the content of the individual pages that I'm going to be building. So remember, we're going to extend from this page. This is the base page we're going to extend from on other files. So now we can go into the home here. Now on the home, what we're going to need is a button. So, actually, first of all, what we're going to do is just extend from the base. So we're saying get the base template, and now we want to drop some stuff in that template. So what do we want to override on that base template? Well, we obviously want to override the name. So although it's the same in this case, let's just do it anyway. So we've got now the name, and then now we want to sort out our block content, so the information that's going to go inside of that base block content area. So let's just open that up. Any blocks that opens, obviously it's going to need to be closed. Pretty sure I'm just copy and pasting here because I'm just thinking about what I can tell you. So now you've got our block open and close. Now we can add something. So all we're going to do here, this is going to be really simple. We're not going to be winning any awards here for design. So we're going to need 3 things. We're going to need 2 links. So 1 title and 2 links. So the first link is going to be a link to the actual, all the collections, so we're using authors here. So that's going to be a link to all the authors. And then the second one is we're going to create a new author. So there's going to be 2 links. So here I'm using Bootstrap button, and I'm defining the button as a link. And then the roller button, I'm going to change my links up in a little bit when I actually build them. So here I'm creating some classes. So a button class, because I'm using Bootstrap, and then the color of the button class. And then I'm going to give it a width of 100. And then I'm going to have a margin at the bottom of 2, so I can make a little break or gap between these 2 buttons. And there we go. So we've got the second button is going to be the add an author button. Okay, so we've got our 2 buttons now. So let's go ahead and have a look at our new design. There we go. So this is it's called Bookstore Collections. So let's actually change that. No, I think that's okay. Bookstore Collections will be okay, won't it? So that's now our homepage sorted. So now we have an entry point into our system. Let's do this first. Let's create a page where we can show all of the authors. Right, so let's just go back. So we're going to just follow the process. Let me put this in some sort of order. We don't need the model. So URLs, views, and then templates. So we're going to build a new URL now. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we're going to be utilizing a different class-based views because we want to list out items. So we're going to call this authors / and then it's not going to be home view. It's going to be called authors view. And then we change the name to author. Authors. Okay, so now we've got our path in place. We can now utilize our app name here. Let's just open up our template, our home template. Now we've got that in place. We can now go ahead and we can define our URL. So let's go ahead and do that. So remember, we're using this namespace to do that. So we're going to need the URL, and then we're going to say we're going to need the books. So go into the books app, and then inside of our books app, you're then going to find the URL for, in this case, I think it's going to be called authors. So let's go in our URL. So we've called it authors. So we've said the app name books and then authors. So that should take us now to that page. So let's go back into our views now. So now we've set up the URL and also the link on the home page. Let's go now into our views and set out our view. So we're going to want to show data. So we're going to need to from dot models. We're going to need to grab our models and import our table. So the table we want to import is obviously author, because we want to show all the data from the author. So now what we want to do is use a list view. So let's go ahead and bring in a list view. So this is another class-based view that allows us to list items. So here we're just going to give the class the parameters that it needs to actually list items, and it's just going to do the rest for us. So that's essentially what's happening here. So we're abstracting a lot of the code that we don't need to design within these predefined views, or predefined classes, sorry, that we can bring in from the Django backend. So let's go now and bring or build a new class. So this is going to be called authors list view, and then let's bring in the list view for this. So here we just need to specify two things, and that's going to be the model, which is going to be author, and then we also then need to specify the template. So here you can see we've got template engine, name, or name suffix. So we want the name, and that's then going to equal whatever our template name is going to be. So this is going to be called the author list.html. Okay, so now we have done that. Let's go in and make our template. So head back in then to our templates. Again, we're using templates within our app. So let's just create a new file. It's called author list. There we go. So now we just need to build from this. So again, we're just going to extend from the base as per normal. So extend from the base, and then now we need to just set out the title. So we can call that authors maybe, or all authors. So that's the title, and then we're going to need our content. So we can set out our content. Okay, so what we wanted to do here then is we just basically just want to return. Now what's happened here in our view is behind the scenes, this ListView class has found the model, grabbed all the data, and now it's going to pass it over to our template. So if you're new to class-based views, you can see that there's no return here. That's all done by the ListView class and the other subclasses that it's connected to. So let's go back into our HTML and have a look at how to extract that now from our class-based view. So let's start off then the content with a title. So this might be a good time to just test this out to make sure this works. Now, I realize that it's not going to work because I've made a few mistakes here. So just going back to the URLs, I can see that I haven't used the right word there. So from.input views. I also notice I've not used commas here either. So I'm going to need one. I'll just put one here anyway, because I know that I'm going to create some new lines later. So that needs doing. Let's just check to see if there's any other problems. Okay, so you can see that I've missed authors list view from the path here. So that's the name of our view, authors, or it should be really author list view. So authors list view is right here. So let's just change that to author list. Okay, so that looks like it's working now. Also, I was sharing the wrong system earlier when I was opening up the project. So we've got a no reverse match here. Authors not found. Is not a valid view function name. Okay, so let's just go back very quickly then. So authors. Okay, let's just get rid of that space there. There we go. Okay, so our project is up and running. So let's go to all authors. So we've now got our template in place. Now we need to loop through all the authors and display them. So before we go ahead and do that, there isn't going to be anything to loop out, of course. So because we don't have any. So let's just go into our project here and let's just create a super user. So normal procedure, admin, no email, admin, and then admin, and then Y, yes. Okay, and then we can go ahead and just start the project again. So let's just go into our database and add something. Now, before we do that, obviously we need to go across to our books. Let's go into the admin area. Now, of course, what we're going to need to do here is obviously register one of our tables, right? One of our models. So let's go ahead and do that. So from.models, let's just bring in, import our model, which is called author. So, and then let's just use admin.site.register. And then that's going to be the author. Okay, so that's our author set. Let's go into our admin area. So we've now got authors here. So let's just add one manually very quickly. Save that. So we've got an author now. So we want to now loop through those authors and display them, of course. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so what's happening here then is that we are passing data across, although it doesn't look like if you're not familiar with class-based views, we are actually passing across the data, the context, to the actual template name here. And that's important to understand with this list view. Now we need to grab that data. Now what we can do here, if we wanted to, was to add a context object name. And that's then going to be the name for the context, the data that we're passing across. And then we can use that obviously to understand where the data is on our template and use that to output the data. Sorry. So that's a kind of reference point to the data that we're sending across to this template. Now we don't need to do that because we know that we're using author here and we're creating a list. Then how we can grab that data is using author_list. So what we're going to do here is create an if statement. You can see I've built this if statement here. So if there is data here in this context, this is the name of the context of the data that we've grabbed from the author table or the authors. If there is that data, then we're going to do something else. Basically, there is no author to display, of course. So we're going to use an if else statement here. So if there isn't any data, we're going to kind of just output there is no author to display. Now what we can do, if there is data, then we're going to create an unordered list using Bootstrap, so list group. And then we'll create some items. So what we're going to need to do here is use a loop. So for each item that is found in the author list context, so for each item there is in the database, we're going to loop out that information. So we put that information, that individual piece that we're looping through at that point in time into the author variable here, say. And then now we can output a new list item. I'm going to give this a list group item, which is again Bootstrap class. And then I'm just going to output this out. So I'm going to grab the data now from author about that individual item that's being looped through. And so that's going to be just the name. That's all I've got in my database, of course. And then there we go. So I'm going to need a link for this. So I'm going to need to build a reverse here so I can get the actual link for this author. So we'll do that shortly, but let's just go ahead and save that, and let's have a go at this. So this should work now. So going back into my homepage, let's go to all authors. So I do have one author. Remember, I did add one. So let's just add author 2 just to show that this is working. And there we go. So we've now got all authors on the page. So now I'm going to create a link here at the bottom. I've created a p tag. Inside of here, I'm going to create a link. So this link is going to take me to the home. So authors home. Now, is that the right thing? No, it's books, isn't it? Okay. So books home. So the role is a button class. Button secondary, so it's going to be a grey button with a width of 100. So that's going to have a cancel link. So let's have a look at that. Oh, that's not working. Home not found. Okay, let's go back in. So home URLs. So in books, we've got our books, and we didn't call that home. So let's call that home. That should now work. There we go. And then cancel. Yeah, and now that takes us home. So now we've got a way of displaying all the authors in our system. So now we want to be able to add a new author, right? So we want to build an author, so then we can then go ahead and build our books for that particular author. So let's just double check that. Yep. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go into our URLs here, and let's now build a new view for this. So this is going to be add. So we can just take what we have here, and then let's just extend this slightly. So authors add slash, and now we're going to use a new view for this. So let's call this so it's not going to be a list, it's going to be a crate. So it's going to be author create view. And then we'll call this author, or add author maybe. Add authors or add author. Okay, so now we've got this in place. We now need to create this view. So let's go back in and build up this view here. So we're going to call this, as you saw, it's going to be the author create view. So this time for this view, we're going to be utilizing the CreateView class-based view. So this is going to be CreateView. So let's just bring it in here. So we're just going to extend from here the CreateView. So here what we need is we're going to need the model. So we're just telling the view what model we're going to use, and that's going to be the author model. And then the template name. So here we're going to build a template called author create.html. Okay, and also we can define the fields that we want to update, right? So we know that inside of our models here, we've just got name. So let's go ahead and just define those. So because we're not going to be building here, we're not going to actually be building our own form. We can just ask Django to do it for us, and we can just tell them what fields to use. So this is one way of doing this, of course. So this is a very quick way of building a form. So here I'm just going to say name. So from the author table, I'm just going to use the name, and I'm just specifying the fields I want to include in my form that I don't need to build in a forms page here. So that quickly builds a form for me. So let's get that going. So that's that done. So what we can now do is think about, well, maybe we want to return a message. So here we're not going to be using Ajax or anything like that. So we want to send back some sort of confirmation, right? So let's do that. So let's import the messages from the contrib. So this is a tool that allows us to kind of generate messages that we can pass over to templates and capture them in templates. So we need to ask ourselves, when would we want a message sent to the user about an action has taken place? Well, what we need to do is to kind of extend the form valid. So here, behind the scenes, the CreateView is going to validate the data that's in this form that we're going to send across, because we're going to add a new author, of course. So what we can do is add an action here that does some other checking of the data, or performs some other actions once the data has been validated. So the data in the form is going to be validated against the table to make sure it's the right data format and the right amount of data that we're sending across and so on. So here what we're going to do is we're going to add a message. So we're going to create a message that is actioned when the actual data is inserted into the database. So we're going to get self.request, and then we're going to create a message. So let's create a message based upon message success. And then here I'm going to have this is the message that's going to appear. The author has been added. There we go. So that's a simple message we're going to create or send across in the context so that we can display once the user has created a new author in this case. So now all we need to do is return. So super, and then we need to return this data. So if you're not too sure what super is, this is essentially giving us access to the function here that's embedded or abstracted away here in the CreateView, and it just allows us to kind of update this with this new information. Okay, so there we go. Okay, valid form. So if I was reading this through, generally, I'm going to use the CreateView here template, which has all the features and functionality to collect the data from the form and then collect the data from the form and put it into the database. That's essentially what this is going to do for me. So all I need to do is specify the model that I want to use to perform this action, and then the template I want to then display the data on or the form on. And then here I've specified the name, and that's the fields that I'm going to use for the form for the user to type in the data. So here I could create a separate form page here and build up my fields if I wanted to, but I'm just going to simplify it here and use fields, the fields attribute here. So, and then I've gone ahead and I've kind of passed in the form and I've kind of extended the form validation process. So here, if the data is valid, we're also going to perform this action here of creating a message that we're going to pass over to the template and just confirm with the user that an author has been added. And now this is only going to appear when the form is valid, when the data has been approved as acceptable to be entered into the database. And then here we're using super here to kind of, like I said, in general terms, overriding or providing additional information for the form validation method, which is a method that's already pre-created within this abstracted class here. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you're not too sure, I do have the class-based view series, which you can kind of run through and get a better understanding of what it is that we're doing here. Okay, so now what we need to do is obviously create our templates. So that's the next step. We've got the URL in place, and we've also now got the template with the function that we want to include. So let's go ahead in our templates, add this new file here, auto create. And so this is going to be, again, just extending from the base. That's the first thing that we need to do. And then we're going to need a title. So let's go ahead and add a title. So this is very same type of process that we've been doing before. So we've then got the content. So extending from the base, we're going to inject the content in the base template. And then what we want to now add is a form. Okay, so now we've got our first form. The action is nothing. So we're going to post this form to this page. That's essentially what's going to happen here. So the action, there's nothing in the action here. Method is going to be post. So that's the method of sending this data over to the server, post. And then inside of here, we can add some hidden fields, the form hidden fields. Maybe you've got some errors, so we can place them up the top here. Now, it's worth reading through that if you are using forms and you haven't seen hidden field before, to have a look at how that works and how that then enables you to display any errors. So next up, we've got the CSRF token. So that's going to be needed to send across because we're posting data to Django. So we're going to need to send that across too. And now we go ahead and display any kind of non-form errors. So we may have set that up to display some non-form errors. So that's a a separate error section that you might want to kind of have a little research into. So I'll put that there. And then we're going to loop through the data. Okay, so how do we collect the data? So here we've created a form, and you can see here we're referencing the data for this form as form. So remember what we want to get from this form that we've generated in our view. So here all we've done here is we've just specified what fields we wanted, but the CreateView behind the scenes is actually going to build the form for us. So here we're just specifying for each of the fields that we specified, do something here. So print them out. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to print out any field errors. And then we've also got then the field label tag and then the field. So you can see I'm going to output the label tag, which I can then also define in my view, and then also the field. So let's have a look at this. So this will be manual at the moment. So let's just double check it's all working. Okay, so what you're going to need to do, I just remembered this, just thinking back, you're going to need to type in the S there. If you're following the code step by step, in the views, it should be messages and not message. So you'll receive an error there maybe. So go back to the home page. Let's go into the authors. Let's just extend this to add, which is our new path. And now we've got the name. Okay, so we don't have a submit button yet, but we can add in a name. So let's go ahead and add in our submit button. So there's probably two buttons you want to make here. So I'm going to make this P class again inside the form and have this button. So this is inside the form. So I've created a button here, submit. The value is not collection, it's add author. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the value is there. I could just remove that, couldn't I? So then you can see I've just styled it as per normal, the width of 100 and the margin at the bottom is 2. So that's add author. And then I've got the second link. So that here on line 24, that's going to be the link that's going to send me back home. So again, I'm just using this URL. So from a namespace, which is not bookstore, which is going to be books, and then home, and then role button, class, and so on. And let's just cancel. So let's go back and refresh. So now we've got our two buttons in place. So let's just add. Okay. So we've tried to add. Now what's happened behind the scenes is we actually have added the data. So if you weren't too sure, the data is being added. But what's happening now through the process of using this class-based view is now expecting by default a redirect, which is defined in the model as the get absolute URL. So what it was trying to do now is actually take you to that item you've just built. So what we need to do now is we need to build a new URL and a get URL method on the model so that we can actually now view what we've just created. So this URL that we're going to build, this is going to need to take in a parameter, and that's the primary key of the author. So let's go ahead now and set this out. So this is going to be a new path, and we want to create our link. So for example, it's going to be author, and then we're going to need to set out our data. So this is going to be a primary key, so it's going to be an integer, and then we'll name it or refer to the data as PK. So that's going to capture the ID of the actual author and then generate our link for us so we can individually access individual authors on a page. So we're going to need a view for that. So let's do that. So let's go for author detail. Yeah, the order detail view dot as view. So let's give that a name. So that can be the author view, or the author detail, sorry. Okay, so that's the author detail. Now then, what we're going to need to do here is go now into our model and create this reverse. So we've set up the reverse tool up here. So we've added in the resources for it, sorry. So now just underneath our name, let's set up our reverse. So this reverse is essentially this is a tool that allows us to build a URL. And in this case, with information from the table. We need to get the ID from the table, for example. So we need to kind of generate this URL that can be used to actually forward to and be referenced to as a URL. So there's a little bit of kind of formatting of the data here as well and preparing it for that. So we can call this method from the model. So we're going to call this get absolute URL because that's what's being expected by our class-based view. And then we're going to return a reverse. So we're going to use this reverse tool to basically build a URL now, a link. So we're going to get the books author detail link. So that's the link that we've just generated here. So essentially we're going to get this link, the whole kind of path. And now we're going to generate this integer here. So that's obviously going to come from the database. So this is going to be the quarks. So additional information PK, that's the reference point, of course, in our URL. And then self primary key. So when we're looking for a specific author, we're going to request a specific author here, and we're going to use the get URL to build this link and then use the key there as whatever item is being passed in this at this point or referred to. We're going to get that ID from the database here and then completely build that URL so that we can then go to that URL path in our browser. So what we're going to need to do now then is go back into our URL. So let's just follow this. We're now going to create the author detail view. So within our views here, maybe I'll just make it under here, the author detail view. So incredibly simple. So we're going to just, in this case, utilize the detail view. So let's bring this in the top here. So this is going to be a detail. This is going to be a class-based view that's predefined for us, pre-created. And like it says, it's just going to show an individual item. So it is expecting one item and it is expecting to be working with one item. So author detail view here. So we're going to need to define the model. That's going to equal author. Yep. Okay, so let's just put semicolon. So we've also then just going to define a template as per normal. So that's going to equal, in this case, author detail.html. Okay, so let's just go ahead and now build up this page. So templates, new file, author detail view. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky now because we're really getting into the thick of it now. We've set out our basic pages. Now we want to start to collect data potentially from multiple tables. So let's just build this up first. So we're going to, as per normal, I'm just going to paste in the base here, extending from the base. And then we also want to create a title. So this time I'm going to create a dynamic title, like you can see here, because I'm going to create a title based upon the author's name. So the title of this page is going to be the author's name. So next up, I add the block content. And now this time at the top of the block content, remember I'm passing across a message. So what I can do now is check for that message. So here's a simple if statement here. So if and end if. And what I'm going to do now is use a list. So I'm just going to call this class messages, for example. And I've got this list item here, which is going to be the message that we're sending across from the view. So in the view here, we've set out a message here. The author has been added. So that's the message. So we can then capture that message. Where are we? Detail here. We've captured that message. So we've created a loop, message in messages. And then for each message, we're going to print that out. So there's only one message. So I guess we could probably see that in action now, assuming that everything is okay. So I made a mistake here in the URLs. I need to type in views, of course. Okay, so with that done, let's go back into our page and let's go to add. So the author's been added. So you can see this is going to be working. So all authors. We can now see all the authors. Let's just go to all. We need to build a link in a second, or sorry, add here. So let's add a new item, add author. We're now presented on the page. So we are going now to our redirect here correctly. So this is author 7. We're now receiving the message. So now what we need to do is prepare the rest of the page. So the rest of this page, so to speak, is going to be filled up with the author's name and then all the books that have been associated to that author. Now let's remember here, we're just outputting information here. We're not using a form here to update or edit or delete any of the data. So here we can pull it out utilizing the foreign key and traverse through to the books table and access the data. So let's have a look at how that's done. So here back in the author's detailed template, let's go ahead now and add a title for this. I'm just going to call this author's book details. Probably not a very good name there. So this is just going to detail all the books about that's related to the author. So we're going to start off with the author's name. So we'll grab that. So we just need to extend there. So you can see I'm just creating this kind of deflex inline. So I've got 2 blocks in line, and then that's going to be the author's name and then the author's name here. So I'm using the title also. So I'm just going to capitalize the first letter in that name. So author.name. So that's going to display the name of the author. And then we can move on. So we've got this little break here, the HR line break. And now we're going to create a loop here. So for book in author books all. So here what I'm doing is I'm traversing that foreign link we have between between the author and the book. So here we have the foreign key author ID to the author here. So essentially I'm starting here in this model and I'm using this foreign key referenced by author here. And I'm then going and traversing into this book table and collecting information that I need to display. So author.books, referring to the books model, and then all, as in get all the data that's related to this particular, in this case, the author. So we start off with the author ID, and then we traverse over into the books table, and then look for all the books that are associated to that author with that ID in the books table. So now that gives me a list of books. I can now use book. So for every item it finds, we then loop through each item and refer to each item as book as we loop through, and then we can extract the data from it. So the ID and of course the title. So at this point, that's the only fields we have available, the title and the ID. The ID being, remember, an automatic field that's created the primary key when we create a model. So let's go back here and complete this. So we'll have a little break there. And at the bottom here, I'm just going to add 2 links. So first of all, soft wrap. First of all, we're going to have a link here to the edit author's books. So this is going to be the link to the page that we're going to build with the inline form, where we're going to update, edit, and add and delete items all in one form. So that will take us to the main form that we're going to build in a minute. And you can see I've added some styling as per normal. And then I'll create the second link, which is just going to take me back to all collections. So this is the URL books authors. So if you're not too sure, just have a look here, authors. Now, it's probably not a very good name here to call this list. I should maybe call this list authors. That's probably a better naming scheme there. So let's just go back to the detail here, and let's call this list authors, and we probably need to update the other pages. So let's just quickly take a look at this. So we're at the home page, go to all authors, okay, cancel. Okay, the reverse field cancel is not found, so we need to sort that out. That's what we just updated, remember. So that cancel there needs to take me to home. So let me just go back into the code. Let's just get all these templates. So we start off with the home. That takes us to the authors list. Now on this authors list here, we should have an URL at the bottom to books home. That's what I was expecting. Why I felt it was a bit strange. We had that problem there because that should take us to the home page. Yeah. So, okay, reverse for authors not found because we've just changed that. So that takes us home, that button. So let's go back to the home page, and then let's just update authors to list authors. So we've got list authors on the front page, and we've got add author. So we don't actually have the link yet for the add author. So let's just bring this in. Now, books, the add author, let's go to the URL. So if we want to add an author, remember it's this one here. So that is just add author. So let's just go back to the home here and update the home with add author on line 9. So that adds and creates that link. So we should now have all authors, yep, cancel home, and then add author. And that's where we can add our author. So that's where we are. The cancel button here works. That takes us back home. So we're now all linked up. So let's just create a new author again. New author 1. That takes us to the author page, which is author at the moment number 9. We can now see the name of the author, new author 1. And now we can go ahead and sort out the form, so we can edit the books, add the books, delete the books for this particular author. And of course, we should then see this list appear here on this page. Now notice this message appears when we've added, but when we refresh, it's then not available. So it's a one-time only message that we're sending across in the context. Right, so now we come to, I guess, what is the main component here using inlines. So this is a very simple example, actually. All this build up to what is essentially going to be just a few lines of code, but hopefully just taking you through this process of building this whole thing. It's maybe giving you a little bit more experience utilizing class-based views and building this form set ready to prepare this data to be edited and saved and updated, etc. So let's start off with the URL. Right, so here what we're going to do is we're going to set out a new path here. And this time we're going to utilize the authors, and we're going to grab the primary key so we know which author we're editing, which books we're editing for. And then we go for book and then edit. So this would be, or we could just go for edit, but it's specifically the books we're editing for this author. So let's just go for that link there. And this time we're going to call this author books update view as underscore view. Okay, and then we'll give it a name equals what can we call this? We call this author book edit. Yeah, so let's call this author books edit. So now we have this in place. Let's go over now to the view and let's build this up. So this is going to be a fairly big view that we're going to be building here. So at the bottom here then, let's go ahead and add a new class. We're going to call this, might as well just copy and paste it, author books view edit view. There we go. And this time we're going to add two classes. So what I want to do in the form is collect one item in the form to edit, one author, sorry, in this case to edit. So I'm going to bring in the SingleObjectMixin, right? So this SingleObjectMixin is a Django mixin that's going to allow me to select, or it's going to give me the functions or the methods to collect one item from the database, or select one item. So we know which item we're dealing with when we're saving, editing, and updating our data. So that is going to be needed here. And I'm also going to bring in the FormView. Okay, so this is obviously, as the name suggests, it's a form view. So it's going to give us the tools and facilities to help deal and manage and access form capabilities, so we can update, delete, edit, etc. So we bring in those two resources. So let's go ahead now and put them in our actual class, or make them available. So we pass them in. Obviously, what's happening now? What's happening now, of course, is essentially we're making these classes available within our class here without going into kind of object-oriented terminology. So we now have access to these classes tools, all these functions and methods inside of these classes. So we can access, override some of these and change, I guess, the settings of these, shall we say, so that we can tailor our application around what the needs of our application. Okay, I'm sorry, I was trying to not make that sound too technical, but give it to you, or try to make that understandable for those who don't understand object-oriented programming. Okay, so let's go ahead now then and create our model, or select our model, which is going to be author. So this is how we're going to start. And then, of course, let's just make a template for this. So this is going to be the author books edit.html. There we go. So that's going to be our template for this. So let's go into our templates and just quickly build that. There we go. So we'll do that in a second. So let's go back here. So what we're going to do then here, let's remember we're building a form now that's going to allow us to view the current books for that author. It's going to also allow us to add books for that author. And it's also going to allow us to edit books from that author, and also delete items for that author. So there's a lot going on here. And really, we're not doing much because the FormView and SingleMixin object is going to pretty much do the back end stuff for us. We just need to specify a few things here, and as well as now providing some kind of overrides. So what we want to do is we want to create an environment where we're selecting one item to be edited. So we need to kind of define that. So potentially we're going to need to define that when we're performing a request for the data, because one thing we're going to do is collect the data from the database and then show it in the form. So we're going to show on that page what books have already been associated to that author. So we're going to need a GET request, or we're going to need to capture a GET request. Now remember, on the front end, when we go to the page and try and collect data, we're sending a HTTP GET request. So here what we're going to do in this function is we're going to define what it is, or the data we want to work with. So the individual item that we want to work with in that form. That's essentially what we're going to do here. So we're just passing in all these items here, args and quargs. So if you don't know what args and quargs are, then just head over to my tutorial on that, where I explain in a little bit more detail what this is. So we're going to set out this kind of variable here in self to make it available in other instances or other functions, methods in this class. So we pass in self and then self.object, and then this will then be accessible outside of this function to be accessed by another method. So that's just a way of kind of making that available as a variable outside this method get. So what we're going to do then is we're going to say self dot get object. So we're going to use this dot get object. Now this is a piece of code that's essentially going to get one item from the database. So get object is part of the SingleObjectMixin. Now if you're not too sure what's going on here with all of these class-based views, what you can do is you can go over to a good website called CBV. Let's have a look at this. And this website here pretty much gives you a rundown of what methods and attributes are available inside. So here, for example, I've selected the FormView. Oh, that's not very clear. This is the FormView. I don't know why that's hiding that. Maybe because I'm zoomed in. So we've got this FormView here. That's what we are using in our code. You can see here we've got all the attributes I can maybe override and all the methods I can utilize and override. So one thing that we'll be doing in a minute is utilizing FormValid to kind of provide some additional information. We did this earlier in actual fact, I think. So we utilized FormValid, and that allowed us to add that message, if you remember, when the data is validated against the form. So you can see there all those different methods, and then you can drill down to that. You can actually then see the code, and that's going to help you create overrides, etc., because this is going to describe to you what this part of the class is actually doing, what this method is actually doing. So this can be an important place to have a look, and you can then start overriding things. So here it says template name. So notice it starts off with equals none. So what's happening here then, because we're using this form view here, template name now, we're kind of overriding that setting, and then we're displaying or we're setting what the actual template should be. So there's a clear correlation there. We bring in this class that has all these attributes and methods in. That's what we're doing in our code. And then we're just overriding some of these properties or these attributes, sorry, in this class that we're kind of bringing over from the Django backend. So these are pre-created classes that we're bringing in here. Hopefully that's starting to make sense. So we're going to use our get object, and then we're going to set out a query set. So query set equals, and this is where it's going to be author dot objects dot all. So essentially what is happening here then, I guess, in layman's terms, is we are basically getting the object that we want to work with. That's essentially what's happening here. So get object, we're going to get a single object and return a single object from the authors table that's related to the form, to the page that we're working on, to the author that we want to use. So what we're doing here is we're just setting that out here in preparation and putting it into the self object. So what we're going to return, super.get. So here, essentially, we're just running this override, request args. Let's just put in the args and args. Okay, so essentially what we've done there is we said that when the user requests a get request to get data, we're going to set up the code that's needed so that we can get that individual item from the database. And we're going to need that and to kind of move that across over to the form so that when we get the data for the form, we collect the right author to edit. I probably said this, I'm probably just going over the same thing and again and again. I know there's a lot there. There's a lot of questions there for new developers. What is super, for example, self object, this idea of using self to access these type of essentially variables we're building outside of this function in other functions inside of this class. So a bit of scope, understanding scope, etc. So we've got the get, so that gets information. So we just added some extra things there for that. So next up, we want to also post data to the database. So we're going to need to do exactly the same thing again here. So again, we're going to need to know what data we're going to be working with to post or update based upon the author. So let's also now just change that to post. And it's going to be pretty much exactly the same code, apart from I'm going to change super.post. That should be pretty much all I need to do there. So that sorts out the post, if I name that properly. Oh, excuse me. Okay, there we go. So now we've got that in place then. Now we need to also think about the form. So we're going to need a form. If we just go back into here, you can see get form. Let's have a look at get form. Here it is. So this is the function that we're going to essentially just add some, so we're going to utilize to get the actual form set. So here it says def get form self form class equals none. So we don't currently have potentially a form. If form class equals none, return form class get form quark. So not much is going on there that I can explain to you easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this function to basically define the form set, right? So, or to connect the form set that we're going to build up, So get form. So we need to get form. We're going to take in self and form class. So we're just following what the actual equals none. Okay, so, and then we return. And we're going to return author. Oh, what was it? So we're going to make a new form set. We haven't done that yet. So I was going to head. So author, book, yeah, form set. So let's create. So this is what we're going to add in a forms. So we're going to create a form set called author books form set. And that's going to be our inline form set. So then we go ahead and let's bring in self.get form quags. Oh no, it's going to be parentheses. And then instance equals. So the instance we want to use. So this is the instance we're defining here. So get form. So let's just imagine here, this is exactly that, get the form. I'm now asking the system to get a form. Well, what form do I want to get? So here what I'm doing is I'm returning the form that I'm going to define, the forms that I'm going to define, and then also the instance that I'm working with. So if we were to read through this now, this is what we're doing here. So we're going to create a page which is going to show all the books that are associated with an author and allow us within one single form to update, edit, delete, add more items for that author, more books. So what we're going to need here is we're going to need to be able to identify the individual author. So here we bring in SingleObjectMixin to help us do that. We're also going to need to actually run a form and perform actions based upon the requests that we receive from the user, whether it be a request for getting data to show on the form, or whether we want to post data to add or edit the form. So we're going to bring in FormView. So here we first specify our model, which is author, main model author, and then the template name. So these are just two overrides we're going to create. So we now have an idea of what we're working with and where the actual form is going to be placed on this template. Right, so now we know that the user is going to send a get request to get data about that author, the books. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to need to be able to tell the system here, we're going to need to define, what author we're working with. So what we're going to do is we're going to take from the SingleObjectMixin, we're going to use the get object, and that's going to allow us then to define a query set that's going to help us identify the individual user. So get object. So we're going to get one item back essentially here that's related to the actual author. So that's going to be passed in automatically. I mean, here we're not actually defining what author, of course, and that's just going to be automatically created. So with that in mind, we now basically return super and get. So all we're doing now really is just defining the fact we've provided an override. So now we do the same thing on post. So again, we're just taking everything that we need, self requests, args, quags if needed. And then we do the same thing again, make it able to find the individual author that we're going to need. So that's going to set up in both cases what author we're working with. So now we're going to use get form. I'm trying to make this easy to understand. So apologies if I'm contradicting myself a little bit here. So get form is going to allow us to define the form that we're going to use, which is going to be the author's book form set, which we're going to set up shortly in the form. And then what we're going to do is we're basically going to take in the instance. We're going to take in the instance, which is going to be here, self object. And that's going to be the individual item that we're working with. So at that point, the form now knows which item we're going to be working with, so it can extract information or add or delete information corresponding to that particular author. Okay, so it's a little bit abstract. So once that's all done, what we then need to do is, well, we just need to save. So what we can do is go ahead and access our form valid. So this is the method that's going to essentially check our form, should bring our form in. It's going to check our form for any errors. So what we can do is a form save. So we're going to need a form save to save the form if everything checks out okay. And then what we can also do is we can add another message if we wanted to here. Because we're not using, for example, Ajax here, this might be a good idea. So here I'm just going to use messages to add again, self-request messages, success. So if it is a success, if it successfully saves, then we're going to say change was saved. So this is already brought in the top here in messages. So we just add on to that. And now what we need to do is return. So let's return. We're going to return a HTTP response redirect. HTTP response. And that's going to be self dot. And then we're just going to set up a URL for this. So successful, or just success URL. So we're going to create a new method, new function called success, or maybe it should be called get success URL. So now what we need to do then is just quickly build this out. So get URL. So we're just taking that self, and then we return reverse. So let's just check, see if we've got reverse at the top here. So we just need to bring that in from the Django URLs. Yep. Okay. And now return reverse. And then we just need to define what it is we want, where we want to return. So here it's going to be books, and then this is the we're going to send you back to the page where the order details were. So not the order details, the author details. So let's just double check our URLs. So the details, which is going to be here. So author detail. So we're going to send them back there, and that's obviously going to list out all the items that we've created for that author. So that's a success. So that's kind of the workflow here. So what we're going to need to do now is actually add in our form. So let's go ahead now and build our form. And I guess this is really the simple part here. So in books, new file, forms.py. So our forms, we just need to use an inline form set factory. So we're going to use inline form set factory. And this is going to help us identify the two tables we want to build and work with in order to kind of save this data that we want to save about the author and the book. So let's just go ahead and bring in our inline form set factory. And then we're just going to need to bring in from models. We're going to need to import both of the tables, which is obviously the author table and then also the book table. So we're going to need both models there. And now we're going to say, or author book form set. So we're going to create this author book form set variable, and inside of here we're going to say inline form set factory. And now we just basically need to define our two tables, so author and book. And then we can also then define the fields on the book that we want to use. So let's do that. Fields, in this case, it's just going to be the title in the book. So there we go. That's it. that's pretty much all we need to do. It's a bit of a anticlimax, really, being that this tutorial is called Inline Formset, and I've just spent 10 seconds of it just creating that. Hopefully it makes sense what's going on here. I bring in the models, and now with the Inline Formset factory, I basically just define the models that I'm working with. So this is the child, this is the parent model or table. Author, so remember the book has the foreign key to the author. So let's just go and have a look. Oh, actually, it might tell us here. So you can see when I hover over here, I've got the Django plugin built in. So it tells me that the Inline Formset factory parent model, and then I can add some other parameters there. And then it looks like I've then got the parent model and then model. So the secondary model. And then I can also have the form set. So somewhere along here will probably be fields. I can't see off the top of it. So optional fields. So we've got fields here. Just here, the fields. So these are just the parameters that you can include. So it's handy if you don't have the Django plugin. I think it's just called Django. There we go. An extension. That's going to provide you some additional information when you do hover over some of these Django functions. So, okay. So hopefully that makes sense. It's as simple as that. So if you've done this already before, for example, inlines utilizing this in the admin area, it's the same type of principles. If you remember, you define the inlines and then basically you put them together in a separate area, and then basically just define what models it is you want to use. So it does get a little bit more trickier when we start utilizing 3 models, of course. But essentially what's happening when we want to run 3 models, so for example, we had author, foreign key book to author. Now imagine if we had book details. So what we're going to do next in the next tutorial is create a new model called images. So the book might have multiple images. So we're going to have an image table, and that's going to be connected via foreign key to book. So we're going to extend this further and gather information about that image as well. So that gets a little bit harder, but we'll do that in the next tutorial. Right, so now we've got that in place. Let's go back to our view. Let's just make sure that we bring this in. So this is going to be from our forms. So we want to import our author book form set. And that's it really with the view, I think. So everything else is handled. So the actual deleting, adding data, etc., that's all going to be handled by SingleObject and the FormView behind the scenes. So it does make it very easy to utilize once you understand these core concepts here. So let's now go over to the template, I guess, and finish off the template, and we're just about there. So this is the author books edit template. So let's just start off just making sure we can actually get to it. So we're here in the author 9. It doesn't look like it's working. Maybe we've got some sort of code error here. Let's have a look. Yep. Okay. So it looks like we've got an error here in URLs, line 12. So views, author books. So we've made a mistake here. I don't think we're going to need that there, are we? So author, and then of course we're going to need it at the end. And then we're going to need a comma here. Apologies. So in our views then, so it looks like it's done. In our views, we've got a line 53 problem. So we don't have a semicolon. Okay, so there we go. So let's go back into our page. So edit author books. So we just need to hook up this page here. So we now know that we're going to have an author book edit name. So let's go into let's follow this. So we go to home, and then we go to the author list. Then we can go to the author detail. And in the detail, we then can click and link. So let's add that here in line 24. So that's in my author detail page. So this is going to be, if you remember, I don't, author book edit. So it's going to link me to that page right there. So I should now be able to refresh this page. Okay, so reverse author book edit with no arguments found, not found. One pattern tried author. Okay, so let's have a look again. Okay, so you can see what's happened there. If I go back, we're not actually passing the argument that's needed. So we need to actually pass the primary key, which is obviously the primary key of the particular item, or sorry, the author that we want to edit the details for. So we can collect that like we did previously. So here what we can do is type pk, and then that's going to equal our author, author.primary key. So that's going to be collected from this page. Remember, we can collect we've got the name there. So we're collecting just the author primary key. So that should now be good. There we go. So edit author books. And here we are now in edit. So one thing before we go into the author books edit page and just finish that off, let's remember also to bring in the HTTP response. I didn't bring that in. So down here, we're using HTTP response redirect to redirect the user once the item has been added. So I just need to add that dependency here in the view before I forget. Okay, so this is ridiculously very easy once you've done this a few times. Let's just go ahead and try this. So first of all, we're going to extend from the base as per normal. So we're in the author's books edit page. So we're going to set up the page so we can edit items or edit books for that particular author that we've selected. So first of all, we're going to have the title as per normal. Well, that's the author's name at this point. And then we've got the content. So we're extending from the base, going to inject now into the content of the base. So first of all, we're going to build a form. So let's build a form. So notice that we're using encryption type multipart form data. So if you're not too sure what that means, just go ahead and have a look. But essentially, this is referring to the fact that the data that we're sending in this form, there might be multiple types of data, for example. So that gives you a rough idea, potentially, what that means. So first of all, we'll start off with the hidden fields. So again, like I said previously, have a look at that. If you want to kind of utilize that type of feature in form, it's available. It's very popular to use for field errors. So we have then the CSRF token, and then any kind of form management form errors. And then we have the title, update collections. So I'm going to say update collection, update author collection. That'd probably be better at this point. So it's up to you what you want to use. I'm just going to say update collection. So now then, so what I'm going to do now is create a for loop. So for book underscore form. So in form.forms. Right. So to try and understand what is happening here, let's just go back into our form here. So let me just soft wrap that. So we know that at this point, we've essentially selected, or we're going to be selecting an individual author. Remember, we're going to use the get and the post here and the get object here to select the individual item that we're working with, the author that we're working with. So Django can predetermine that. We help Django predetermine that so we can set out author.objects.or and get object. So it knows what page we're on. So Django knows what page we're on. It knows what user we're now using. So we can pass that over to the form. So essentially, we could look at it here. What we're doing here, like I said, is we're going to collect the form data essentially here. So we go into our author books form set and forms. And what we're doing here is we're just specifying, remember, our inline factory here, the parent model, and also the second model that we want to build with. Now, what we're trying to do here is collect all of those books that are related to the author. That's what we're doing now. So this is the command here, essentially. So for any books that we have in this form, so the data is now being collected, say, so it's now collected all the data about the books or all the books that are associated to the author. And now what we're doing here is for book underscore author, book underscore form. So get the book data. If there's any book data in the form, in form.forms, so if there are any data there, any book data in forms.form, we're going to do something. So what we're going to do is, well, we're going to work out, first of all, if there is a book or not. So if book form instance ID, so we're going to need else here. So if there is a book, if we do find a book instance inside of our form data, what we're going to do is we're going to display the title. So if the form length in general is more than 1, that does mean, as you might imagine, that will mean that we will have data in our form. So therefore, we print out add another book. Now, of course, if the form's length is less than 1, obviously we don't have any books in our associated to the author yet. So what we print out is add a book. Okay, so now what we can do is just continue. So all we've done here is we've just simply printed out, all we've done here is we've just printed out any of the books that are currently, we're going to display any books that are currently associated to our author. Now, I appreciate at this point that might not be making much sense here, how that is working, and I appreciate that. Let's just move on first and see if we can come back, and I'll try and summarize that. So now we're going to create a form now for, well, essentially here what we're going to do now is set out some new areas where I can add some data. So this is going to give me here three new inputs to allow me to add any data. And what I do is when we get this working in a second, I'll remove some of this code so you can kind of see and start to work out what this code is doing. So we're going to have a line break and then the p tags at the end where we're just going to add some buttons. So one button for updating. So this is my update button here, value update collection, button type submit. So as long as you've got button type submit, I've then got some, as per normal, some bootstrap code there. And then we're going to then just have the button that's going to take us back to the author's page to show all the books that are currently connected to that author. So let's just give this a go. I'm going to save that. Let's just have a look if there's any errors. Okay, looks like we're okay. So let's now have a look. So over to the home page then, all authors. Okay, we've got quite a few now. And we need to connect these up in a second so that we can actually click on them. Let's just do that now. It just makes it a lot easier to deal with. So this is going to be this is the list, isn't it? So let's just bring this down. So at the bottom of the list here, we have set out a link here to cancel. That takes us to the home page. So let's just put another button here so that we can, oh no, sorry, we're not making a button. Sorry, we want to make because here, for example, in the A tag, we want to set out the actual URL of each author. So if you remember, the URL is going to come from the model in the author here. So get the author details. So let's just put that in here. So author.get absolute URL. Okay, so that saves that. So let's go back now into our page, a refresh. So all authors, we should now be able to link from the authors, we can, to the author's overview here. It says changes were saved. I'm not totally sure maybe why that's come up. So now we can go ahead and maybe edit the author's books. So you can see there's no books currently connected to this author. So let's just call this B1, B2 and B3. So now we can update the collection. Okay, so now we've got reverse for author detail with no argument, not found, one pattern, tried authors. Okay, so we've got a problem here with the pattern. So it looks like books edit. So let's go back down here in our, I think it's in our views. I think we've got a problem in our view. So books. So what we're trying to do here is reverse. When it is successful, we're reversing books author detail. What we're going to need to do here, I think I'd put it maybe in the wrong place earlier, but what we're going to do here is we're going to need to pass over. I'm having a deja vu moment. Maybe I did it wrong earlier. So we're going to need the primary key. Yeah, I did, didn't I? I did it on another page, didn't I? Just shortly. Not too long ago. Okay, so anyway, we need the object.pk. So let's get the object primary key. So we're going to pass over as well as the reverse here. We're going to also need to pass in the data that's going to be formulated here in the URL. Remember here in the line 12, we're making the URL for the author book edit. So we're going to need to pass in that data just to finish off that URL. So let's go back now and refresh. So it looks like it said it's saved. It doesn't look like it's added in there. So let's just go back to our collection. So let's edit the books. Okay, so the books are still there. So that functionality seems to be working okay. So let's just go ahead and, for example, delete the first and the third one. But let's add D to see if this is working. So that works okay. So we're just not outputting at the moment. So the message also appears, changes were saved. So that is working okay. So it's just the output of the data. So let's have a look at this first. Okay, so did you spot the error? Okay, so I actually told you the answer and then I didn't actually do what I told you to do. So if you go back into our URLs, inside of our models, remember I said that when we kind of traverse from author to model to collect data about, in this case, we're going to collect all the books about that particular author. So what we need to do is we need to refer here to the actual foreign key instance in the book, but the name, the related name. So here we're in author here and we're saying, oh, we want to get some data here in books. So to do that, we need to actually reference the actual author, which is the foreign key, via the related name. So if we copy that and go into our detail page here, at the moment, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, for where there is books in author, traverse to books all. This is not working because books isn't referred to. Remember, I'm using the related name book author. So I'm going from the author table to the book author foreign key and then getting all the data that's related to this current author. And then I'm going to print out the book, in this case, the ID in the title. Okay, so that's why it's not working. So let's go back in and let's just start again from fresh. So let's add a new author, let's call this new author 2. So we add a new author. Let's edit the author's books. We'll just call this B1, B2, just that'll do. Update collection. So now you can see it's outputting the items. So this might be absolutely anything. In your context, this might be anything. This might be orders and products in the order. It might be invoice and invoice items here. So we can then edit them again. So maybe we want to kind of delete. So you can go off and extend this now because we could have drop downs here with data, for example, from the actual books field, from the books model. So there's a whole load of things here we could have now kind of start to integrating here. But you can see potentially how easy it is using class-based views to kind of set this type of form up and how powerful it is. And all we've really done is just told it a little bit about what data we want to use. So we can now delete individual items and add at the same time. So we can perform multiple operations. So I'll do B3 and B4. So you can see I've deleted one and added B4 and B3 and deleted B1, book 1. So there we go. So that is the final product that we're building. Hopefully that was useful. Sorry if it was a little bit long-winded. Hopefully you enjoyed going through that. So I will be following this up with part 2. Actually, before I go, I did say that we'll have a look at the edit here. So let's just go ahead. Now we're going in the author books edit page. to try and understand this a little bit more. So let's just remove this table. So here I'm taking the book data as a table. So I'm just basically formatting it as a table. So that's just a built-in function that I can perform. So let's now try and do that. So notice now when I take that away, that takes away the option of actually adding new items. So you can see what that piece of code is there based on basically just taking it away. So that will provide us the new fields for us to work. And you can see here then this if here is going to actually collect the items from the database. So have a go, try and replicate it, and then just slowly change this and become more comfortable. Understand a little bit more about these naming conventions. This is important. So when you go into the views, remember what I said, we could, if it makes it easier for you to begin with, to understand what the data names are, then by means go ahead and use a context object name. And that's obviously the name of the data. So whatever you want the name of the data to be on the page to access it as, then change it. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's going to use the model name and potentially then an additionality. So form, we saw list, etc. So identifies what we're doing. So this is why it says book underscore form. It's referring to the name of the model. So we can start to kind of change those things around. And that's where it gets a little bit confusing to begin with. Well, how do we actually collect the data? So that's important to understand. So like I said, these hidden fields, etc., just have a look. I've just added them in there just for additional reading for you. They can be useful to use. And you can see now that I've used a table for the form, as well as earlier, I think I printed out automatically, I printed out the fields. So just some other ways of outputting forms. I could have gone into the forms and I could have added like a form set to this and defined my forms and injected classes, etc., etc. And that's available too for this. Okay, so there we go. Some additional information really to try and point you towards understanding this a little bit more. And there we have it. Hopefully that was useful. Like I said, if you have got to the end, thank you very much for listening all the way to the end. I value your feedback. If you do have any feedback to try and make these things better, maybe I need to, there's just some small changes sometimes I receive. Someone suggested before that maybe I should change the colors of Visual Studio Code, maybe the kind of templating will make it look nicer to look at. Any little things like that. I'm glad to take any suggestions from you. Any input is great input, even if it's negative, you think it's negative input, or as long as it's constructive feedback, all feedback is good feedback. So thank you very much, and I'll see you hopefully in the next tutorial where we have a look at 3 tables with 1 foreign key. So it's going to be a lot quicker in the second one because we've already got the setup here. We just need to extend from where we are now.